Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to CPA Academy. My name is Chris and I will be your webinar moderator today. Today's webinar is titled Diversity and Inclusion, One-on-One, Building Confidence. Today's presenters are Jina Etienne and Maggie Wall. Now before we get started, pull out your questions panel on your interface there and let me know that you can see and hear all of us as well as see the slides. Also, while you're doing this, let me know where you are located in the United States or wherever you are in the world. And I'm seeing Philadelphia, I'm seeing Tampa, fantastic, New York, hello. So if you have any other questions during this, by all means, use the questions panel to ask me questions. And if you have any technical issues, you can ask me questions there as well. One other housekeeping that we need to go over really quick is your CPE. Today's CPE credit is worth 1 CPE credit hour. The way you earn that credit hour is going to be very straightforward. Just stay logged in with us for 15 minutes of the entire time and answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions. The CPE will be issued within 24 hours and will be available in your CPA Academy folders. Also, if you would like to check out some of the handouts that are available, please download those as well and view them at your leisure. And with no further ado, please welcome Jina Etienne and Maggie Wall. Take it over, guys.
Chris, I don't know if you saw, but somebody in the chat said they love your shirt. So there you go.
Why,
hello.
thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode, if you will, of D&I One-on-One. Joining me today is Maggie, and she won't be on camera because we're having some technical issues. So unfortunately, you just get to look at me. I'll turn my camera off from time to time so we can focus on the slides. So today we're going to be talking about building confidence. It's Women's History Month. Actually, it just ended yesterday, but we were planning this in honor of Women's History Month. And we really wanted to talk about this topic in the context of that, but also more broadly for those who are minorities, members of underrepresented groups, and the challenges it takes to really use your voice and be engaged. So joining me today is Maggie Wall, and I met Maggie last year. She was a panelist on a diversity at the New York State Society's Diversity Conference, really talking about the same subject. And I really wanted to bring her on and talk with her again because in her role, she is now focused on helping improve diversity and understanding how the bank can work more with diverse communities, as well as train their staff, train the employees at the bank to be able to service and understand and connect with those communities. And so, Maggie, I just want to say thank you for joining me. And did I get the description of your role correct?
You did, and thank you. And I'm so sorry that you all can't see me on the other side of the camera, but you've got a picture. I could see myself on the screen, so that's about as close as we're going to get. Again, technical difficulties. I am in a new role since last July. Title reads Head of Diverse Growth Segments. And Jina, you and I have spoken about my goal, my objective with this role is to prove there is an ROI in DE&I. And I've got 3 key priorities, not only to attract and deepen with diverse segments and underserved segments, but also to think about those who serve those clients. Are they representative of the groups that we want to attract? And then the training and education piece being the third pillar, the third leg of that objective, of which I'm very focused on. So, yep, you got it.
Well, I just want to remind our attendees that we will be taking questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. We've reserved some time. But I would encourage you to put questions in as we go along, because oftentimes we can just kind of take it and roll with it. We don't have to wait till the end. Now, before we get in trouble, Maggie, what I usually want to do is we start with a polling question. And so we have a couple demographic questions in here. We'd love to just get a sense of our audience. So Chris, can we go ahead and launch that first poll?
Absolutely. Here's polling question number 1. What is your gender? And this poll will remain up for approximately 60 seconds. By all means, please chime in now and provide your answers.
It's going to be interesting to see what the answers are. And remember, everybody, this is private, confidential. This isn't information that is going to be made public to anybody. It's just for our use here in this session. I think we have about 30 seconds. I'll share this one thing that if people didn't know. The U.S. passport recently has changed. So the gender choices on that are male, female, and then there's an X option. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because we had a couple seconds.
Fantastic. We've got about 5 more seconds here, and I will close this out in 3, 2, 1. Shall I share this as well, Jina?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. And these are your results.
So the majority of our audience is female, 31%, male, 2% non-binary, 3% preferred not to answer. Now somebody's saying it didn't show up on the screen. I'm not seeing the poll results on my end, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to.
I'll address that within my answer to that question, to their question, their issue. Thank you.
Well, so there you go. I'll just repeat them again. Male, 31%. Female, 64%. Did I get that right? Yep. Non-binary, 2%. And prefer not to answer, 3%. So before we go any further, because Maggie, I want to ask you a little bit about that. I just want to show everybody on the screen right now are just the general talking points, the things that we were planning to cover today. So understanding segmentation, diversity segmentation, and serving diverse clients. What does it mean when we talk about diversifying your client base? Understanding generational differences as well as barriers in general and specifically facing women. And so, Maggie, can I start by asking you the question on diversity segmentation? Because one of the things when we first met, you were talking about your role as it relates to generation building and wealth building, and it was specifically around women. I don't know if I remember the specific point you were making, but I'm going to go to this slide here. Let's look at this slide.
Jina,
Yes.
do you mind if we get your the screen refresh? If you could.
Oh, sure.
We need to. We're still seeing the poll stuck on the poll.
Got it. So what do you want me to do?
So I want you to stop sharing and then reshare, and it'll just refresh.
Got it. Are we back?
We are. Perfect.
Yay.
Go for it.
Okay. We're having some technical fun today. All right. So I can see that people are still coming through. I will trust that you all will take care of this because I think I see some things coming through the chat. Maggie, can you see the screen?
I can. And so, yes, this is exactly what you and I have been talking about, Jina, that women make up 50.8% of the population. Women are making 85% of the buying decisions in the US today. Women make decisions about buying appliances, buying cars, buying clothing, buying groceries, electronics. All those buying decisions are being made. And women control almost 3/4 of America's wealth, $72 trillion in wealth, which is an increase from $51 trillion from 2015. Now, here's the shift that's going to happen in this decade. There's going to be an additional $30 trillion in wealth transfer that's going to move to women by the end of the decade. And as we all know, this August, there was a complete shift. There are more millennials in this country today than there are baby boomers. The baby boomers are aging. And the reason why there's going to be $30 trillion in wealth transfer that's going to be made is as the baby boomers age, they pass those assets over to their wives and to their children, who in some cases are daughters. Now, while I've given you this great migration of wealth that's going to happen, I'm also going to tell you that while women are making lots of decisions, they're going to inherit lots of wealth. It's certainly coming down the pike. When we think about the ways that they lead into investing, only 16% of women feel confident enough to be making decisions as it relates to their finances. So great wealth transfer, but not, and great buying decisions. And for the men that are on the call, you know, I assure you, I've done this presentation or I've shared some of these stats before, and the men inevitably always say on the other side, Maggie, I am well aware of who is spending money in my household. But yes, lots of decisions being made, but on the other side, not so much decisions when it comes to financial decisions and financial decisions that lead to wealth.
Well, you know, so it's interesting you say that, because the idea of, and I'm assuming it was jokingly, oh yeah, I know who's spending the money in my household. But I think the bigger question here, especially when we talk about demographic shifts and we talk about just the general barriers facing women. I mean, this series is about understanding a lot of the different nuances and complexities of diversity and inclusion. And each conversation is focused on one thing. And today it's about building confidence. And we've been talking about it, you know, Maggie, you and I talk about it in the context
Yes.
of women. And so, yeah, cheeky smile, women spend the money. But isn't the broader concern, one, women have a longer life expectancy than men, and two,
Yes.
spending the money isn't the same thing as being comfortable making decisions about the money, investing the money, managing the money, and then owning the money in your own name. This isn't just true for women. This is also a similar challenge for minorities and underrepresented groups.
There is a big difference when it comes to how you manage your money versus how you think about investing your money. And yes, I think there are great challenges that are out there, especially for women, because of all the breaks. And you know, you talked about women do live longer. And I've seen two studies. I've seen one where it says women will outlive their spouses by 5 to 6 years. I've seen another study that says up to 15 years. Look, no doubt, in the United States, we're making great strides when it comes to healthcare, and individuals are living longer, and individuals are needing to have the money continue to take care of them longer in their lives. But women have this unique situation, Jina and others, and we know it well, right? I mean, it starts off with childcare. Sometimes we take time off to take care of childcare. The second thing that happens is, you know, you've got the sandwich generation. You've got on one end, and then you've got on the other. This is the second time today that I'm talking about elder care and to aging parents and taking care of them. And then you've got the child care situation, you've got the elder care situation. And so those breaks, sometimes what happens is it affects the female women much more so than men. And it's just things that we have to keep in mind when we think about how much you're going to have longer in life versus today.
Right. So shifting away from just the underlying wealth issues, and let's talk about it from the perspective of the organization. And in your role, you're looking to expand the marketplace. So what are some of the things that the bank had to think about, or that the bank asked you to think about in terms of understanding the segmenting the market and looking at the market from a diversity perspective? Was there something that you did that was different, rather than just say, well, let's get more women customers, or we need more people from the, you know, people of color as customers? Did you look more deeply than that?
So, you know, the way that financial institutions think about segmentation strategy is really based upon how much money do you have on us,
Mm-hmm.
as well as how much money do you have that we don't have, right? So the segmentation strategy is, where are you in that affluence scale? I challenge that thinking and have thought about it from the perspective, excuse me, of gender and race and orientation. And I have to tell you, a lot of what I've been doing of late is holding listening sessions with different segments, doing surveys and learning more from different segments. Do men and women approach finances differently? Do women under 40 think about their financial wellness differently than women over 40? Does race, do some of the challenges within race, whether it be by gender or not, come into play? And so my segmentation strategy is completely different than the way banks have thought about it in the past. And let me tell you, every time I share some of this, you could see the wheels turning. And I wish you could see my hands that are around my head right now. The wheels are turning when I start to challenge everyone and say to them, we must be thinking differently. And let me give you an example of why that is. In this country today, those who are accumulating wealth are growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, there's a study out there that talks about those who are earning $125,000 or more. Average white population, 54% in the past since 2015. Well, guess what? The African-American Black population has grown by 65%. I could talk about the Hispanic population growing by 72%. I could talk about the Asian population as well. So when you think about segmentation and you think about those who are building and growing, salaries are going up, positions are being more, yes, the census population is giving us great insight around who is not only part of the population, but on the flip side, how the earning potential of these individuals. And once again, I challenge, we must pay attention because wealth accumulation is happening from a segment perspective that we've never looked at before. And if we don't pay attention to it, we are going to miss an opportunity to be able to help those underserved segments grow and prosper to their potential.
It's interesting on this. I came across this stat many, many years ago, and it hasn't changed a lot. The only thing that's really changed is it says right here in 2045, but depending on who you talk to, it may be a little earlier, it may be a little later, but we know the demographic shifts are in fact happening. And even when we look at women in college and the gender split in college, we see more and more women are attending college, finishing colleges and finishing college and getting degrees and advanced degrees. I saw a very interesting article just this morning. I actually posted it on LinkedIn and I tweeted it, that says that we are at the point of gender pay equity between men and women in some areas, some specific cities for women under 30. And one of the cities was here, I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and one of the cities is Washington, D.C. I'm just outside of Washington, D.C. And so it's interesting and exciting to see that progress.
Yeah.
But we know that these shifts are going to change the way organizations need to think about serving their markets. Now, what time is it? I'm trying to keep track of time, just so that we make sure.
Can I just make a comment on this
Absolutely.
page when we talk about the minority white versus the majority? One of the interesting parts about the census, at least for the one that just came out, is that when you are asked, the way that we asked questions before to identify minority status was, are you white? Are you Hispanic? Are you Black? Are you Asian, right? And so what this survey told us more than any other was that I don't assimilate to being one or another. I am Black and I am white. I am Asian and I am Hispanic. I am white and I am Asian. There is a mixture. So when you're asking me point blank to go one, I'm not that one particular race because I'm a blended race. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's happening in the country. And so when you've got the demographics shift that's coming, it's not because one race is going to take over another. It's that blended race is really coming into play where one says, I don't say I am of one race versus another. I'm a blended race. And there lies the majority in this country, which happens to be white, is now shifting to be the minority because blended is going to take over. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was also a new increase on the census where people are no longer reporting the actual selection of one race. They're selecting
Yes.
to be racial. So I want to switch gears for a moment. And one of the things you spoke about when we talked, I'm looking at my notes, and you were talking about having to think about your teams, recruiting and advisors, training them to
Yeah.
serve diverse clients. Can you talk a little bit about, one, why did you think that you needed to do that? Is it different serving different clients, or is it a question of the comfort level and maybe the cultural awareness of employees at the bank working with employees that look different than them, have different socioeconomic backgrounds, et cetera? Was there some thinking behind what was driving that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So when I took a look at the demographic of the advisors in wealth management, I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that it is very much a male-dominated industry. And when you think about diversity within that group, I think we have we have room to grow from a diversity perspective. And so what I wanted to do, based upon those listening sessions that I held and feedback that I've gotten from clients in the past, they have said, I need someone who sits across from me, who understands me, who knows me at a level that goes beyond just my finances, that I can relate to.
Right.
And so I'll give you an example. Remember I said to you, Jina, I held sessions for under 40 and over 40 groups. And this was a group under 40. The person that I was speaking to, it was a number of women on a WebEx with me. And I was asking a question about, how do they feel when they speak to a financial advisor? And the response that I got back was that they didn't want, they felt that the person was talking above them, that the person really didn't know them. And if that person understood them a little bit better, it would help. And they actually said, and they've said this a number of times, but if it was a woman sitting across from me, I might feel differently. Or if the person sits across from me can relate to me, it will help. And so there is that level of, I want someone sitting across from me that can understand me, that takes the time to get to know me. Yeah, anyone could do that. Gender doesn't play a role in that. But women approach their investing or their financial, journey based upon goals. They want goals, while men may approach it based upon results. So if you're sitting across your client, and now who happens to be a woman, and if you're focusing it on, I'm only going to talk to you about the results. If, the rate of return you're going to get on this is this, and you're going to get $1 million if you keep this in the account with 7% return, you're going to get Y. That doesn't resonate for a woman. If you say to a woman, but I'm going to help you take care of your children's education, I'm going to help you take care of your retirement, and you're going to live the lifestyle that you want, that resonates. So understanding how to communicate and how to make those connections based upon gender or even race, just, sometimes it's, I didn't come from this background, so could you slow it down for me? I was not taught this from my parents, and you and I talked about how our parents sometimes influence our lives. And so it's really, really important for me to make sure that our advisors who sit across from our clients can have that conversation and can make that relation, that bring that together. But here's what I know. If I were to go out and recruit advisors and bring them into the organization, they would look exactly like the ones I have here. And I knew I couldn't do that.
Right.
And I knew the only way that I could make a change is to go and build a program. So I built a program. And I built a program where I want to bring advisors who are diverse, who have no licensing, who have no background in wealth, and I want to bring them into the organization. I'm going to sponsor them to get their licensing. In fact, one of them just texted me right before the call. She happens to be a young woman from Kenya. She lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and she just passed her test. And she texted me and told me that that was the case, and I'm going to call her right after this to congratulate her. She is going to be awesome because you know what she says? I'm going to go back and help my community when I get through this licensing, and I have no doubt that she will. So the way that you change it, and I'm going to use the word, we must be intentional. We have to be intentional if we're going to make a change. So I am intentionally going out and looking for advisors who do not look like the ones that I have in our business today. And there, you're going to be able to change the landscape. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you're intentional, you can start making progress.
It's a journey. All right, Chris, let's go ahead. I want to switch the conversation, and I want to use the second results of the second polling question to get us there. So let's go ahead and launch that second poll.
Here's your second poll. What generation do you belong to? And again, the poll will be up for 60 seconds as you put in your answers.
I was just looking at the strata here, and I remember there's Boomer 1, there's Boomer 2, there's the silent generation. Depending on what terms you're familiar with, all of those are included in the Boomer or traditionalist group. So it just depends on what chart or graph you're looking at. I'll tell you, I'm a Gen X. I'm just shy of being a Boomer. I'm very happy I'm not a Boomer.
Very happy.
My husband, if he heard this, he would probably yell at me. But technically, he's the Boomer, but he refuses to acknowledge that. He says he's a Gen X because he just missed it by like a month, the cutoff, depending on what chart you use.
He won't accept it, will he?
No.
Okay. I'm going to close out this poll, folks, in 3, 2, 1, and these are your results. So mostly Gen X.
So, wow. I was hoping it was, so it's really close. Really close. So somebody actually has a question. Let me see. Oops. I have the wrong slide up. There we go. Somebody said born in 1980, don't identify with any of them. And another person said, isn't generation misleading since the year ranges constantly shift? I used to be a Gen Xer, but got shifted to the tail end of millennial. Now, that's a very good point. And the generations, depending on what chart you look at, the year or the cutoff can move, 1 or 2 years either way. And in some charts, they get as granular as the month. I would say take all of it as a grain of salt because I'm a Gen X, but that doesn't mean like any other stereotype, all aspects of the Gen X generation, you can prescribe to me. And the reality, though, is there are some different things we can think about besides personality. And so looking at this result, 34% of our attendees said they were Gen X. 33% said millennial. What I was secretly hoping was that those numbers might align with the numbers I'm showing here on the slide. On the slide, this is the general breakdown of the workforce today. The biggest number are millennials, and the next biggest number are Generation X. And so looking at that, understanding what is driving the different groups is important in knowing how to serve those groups. So bringing it back, Maggie, to the work that you're doing, if the question of the wealth management industry has traditionally started with how much money do you have that is with me, or how much money do you have, how much wealth do you have that is elsewhere that we could transfer to me? And if most of that wealth lives in this little teeny red dot here, or the tan dot, so traditionalists or boomers, does a business need to think differently about working with Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, or is it just approaching them? You don't have to do anything different. You just have to start trying to reach out to them? Is it either one of those or both? Does that make
So
sense?
I think yes, I think it's a little bit of both. I'm going to go back to something else I have to pay attention to the baby boomer generation, because those assets, as I shared with you earlier, the 30 trillion that's going to be the wealth transfer by the end of this decade will move over to women. And when you think about the baby boomer generation, women, as I've been really digging deep, and this came up in the on March 8th when it was International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. And I was I had to do a presentation to a group. And while I knew these things, I think it really resonated for me for this channel, which is that women were not able to open up bank accounts on their own.
Yeah.
They had to open it up as joint accounts 1960. Women were not allowed to get their own credit card until 1974, and an act of Congress needed to take place. And then we wonder why maybe the baby boomer women generation take a back seat when it comes to finances, mm-hmm. and men really leaned in, right? So I've got to pay attention to that, because that group is going to start to take over. But then you've got the Gen X and the millennial group that you do have to pay attention to. And what I will say to you is this group, while they are much more active and much more engaged when it comes to their finances, there is that C word, Jina, which is the confidence, right? Mm-hmm. That is lacking, that we have to pay attention to.
Right. I'm actually going to move to that slide. I love this picture. There are two pictures in here, and I love. And the title, when you and I were talking about this webinar and we were trying to come up with a title, you said something, and I wrote it down here, that when you're looking at a group, and you just gave an example of it just now, when you're looking at a group, baby boomers, then you double click. And when you double click, you can talk about what that means. When you double clicked on that group and you zoom in a little bit, and now you see the demographic shift between men and women. And in theory, you could double click again and start looking at women by, in differences of color or by socioeconomic background or ethnicity, and then you double click again. So I put this up here to talk about confidence, because you just talked about it. But I also want to ask you, after you make any comments you have on this, to talk about the double click thing.
Yeah. It's not enough for me to think about helping a group and the segmentation strategy, whether it be gender or race or orientation. There is always a double click, right? And you can always go deeper. And so I can't generalize and say women. I can't generalize and say Hispanic population. It is the women of the Hispanic population or the baby boomer generation of the Hispanic generation. There are different ways that you can think about the clients and how you serve them based upon that double click. And the double click just makes you get that much better, that much more focused around the segment that you want to be able to focus on, whether it's you're building your business around them. I know many of you are CPAs in the industry, right? And you think about your client base and building relationships the same way a banker does, or someone in banking. It's not enough to say, I'm going to focus on women. We have to be able to think a little bit more deeply about that segmentation strategy that takes us even further, because when we do, we will serve our clients that much better.
So again, I'm looking back at my notes, and you talk about having a segmentation strategy broadly around diversity. Gender is one of the areas, also race and orientation I had in my notes. So you're doing the double click in terms of your own diversity strategy and looking across multiple dimensions of diversity. Right. Not just singularly, but the intersection of those?
The intersection is really important. So even if you think about orientation, right? And orientation could be women, orientation could be men. It's not just you're gay, and or you're a gay woman, but you're Black, right? There are different intersections within that you can pay attention to, and there are uniqueness to those segmentation and how you can serve those clients. So yes, very much so.
So on this confidence slide, you talk about how, where's the quote? You said something about its movement beyond my challenge. Is that what this has here? That
Yeah.
when you talk about confidence, and you mentioned earlier that people don't feel comfortable asking questions sometimes because the person that they'd have to ask is too different from them or unfamiliar to them or doesn't seem to understand them. And so that's confidence. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so let me start off. I read a book, it's called The Confidence Code. It's by Claire Shipman. And she did a segment, she did a whole study about confidence, and I find it to be absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that she brought to the table. I think many of us think that confidence is the result of how you feel about yourself, how good you feel about yourself. But that's not what confidence is. What confidence is when you put your thoughts into action, and when you move towards the challenges, when you go towards the thing that you believe will hold you back. How many times have you faced a challenge and you thought, I don't want to go there. I'm going to go where the easier road is. And women, as an example, lack the confidence. And the more that I spend time with this, and the way that they have to overcome the lack of confidence is to move towards it. Now, I'm talking about it from a finance perspective, an investment perspective, but I also think it falls right into your personal life as well. There are challenges that one faces. There are going to be those things that are going to be roadblocks, but you have to move towards it. You have to move towards it wholeheartedly versus trying to go off in the other direction. When you do that, and you do that over and over and over again, over time, you will build your confidence and be able to overcome it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Can you repeat the name of the book?
It's called The Confidence Code.
Confidence Code or Competence Code?
No, Confidence. CONFIDENCE.
Got it. Confidence Code. And is it the author? Is that the one on this quote here, Claire Shipman?
Yes, Claire Shipman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I had that. So I think one of the interesting things you talk about there is it could be investment decisions. It's in our personal life, but it's also as employers and looking at the staff and the people that we lead, the people that we manage, the people that work within organizations. These are the same challenges that come up, even if it's sitting around a conference room table, talking about a problem or a strategy, or just, working through your routine weekly agenda. And you have to have a certain level of confidence to raise your hand, to ask a question, to challenge an idea when you are a minority. So it could be the only woman in the room.
Yes.
It could be the only person of color in the room. And so confidence also brings us to the workplace, and it involves so many different things and how we interact and how we engage, what we do, what we don't do, what we share, what we don't share. And so that's why I thought confidence it's a broad topic, and it's something that impacts those who are different in a different way than those in the majority. But to your point, women have a challenge historically, and they've even reported to you in your focus groups and your conversations and your listening sessions that they have been more reticent to ask questions.
Yes.
Just because they haven't had this exposure, this experience, this encouragement And it's almost like you feel like you have to know something before you can ask a question. But if you know it, you don't need to ask the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely does. You know, the interesting part about what Claire Shipman talks about is that in her research, confidence at birth is anywhere between 25 and 50% genetic, right? So yeah, some of it comes to us at birth, but the other 75, 50% comes through us through life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so back to it's a journey, Jina, right? It is a journey, and you have to be able to work through the challenges. So it's not going to be, I'm confident and I was born this way. Only a small, a portion of that is going to be you're born that way. The rest of it is going to come through with what you do to be able to overcome those challenges. And women especially are the ones who, you know, in their lives have held back and not really leaned in the way they need to. And to your point, minorities as well. You could put this across the board and talk about it that way. But it is there is that. I wanted to share that stat with you that you could be born with it, but it's not 100% there. The rest of it, you have to earn it.
I would add, and so I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. As you were saying that, there were little baby triggers, I guess, going off in my head, because I agree 100% with the way you presented that in the context you presented it. I also acknowledge that there are systemic barriers that some have faced, and despite the fact that you might want to lean into something, maybe it either hasn't been safe to do so or you haven't had the opportunity to do so, not for lack of want. And then the other thing I would say is that there's some of that confidence that you gain, it's experiential, and the norms of the community, the culture, the heritage, the background, your family structure, whatever the case may be.
Yes.
Those norms create a space for you to do that. And again, shifting this into the context of the workplace, I mean, all of those things that you're talking about the way we show up as people, those same people show up at the workplace. And so having to then lean into that and gain your confidence by being willing to ask questions. I was on a phone call with a friend yesterday, and, you know, we're commiserating on some of our work challenges and things like that. And she said something very interesting to me. She said that if she doesn't ask, she's seen as not a very strong leader. But if she does ask and try to challenge an idea, she's seen as too assertive and in a bossy way. You know, women get called the B word, and I'm not talking about the word bossy, because we are going against the cultural norms of business and the cultural norms for women. If women couldn't own a bank, have a bank account, or own a credit card without her husband's permission,
yes,
until 30 years ago, 20 years ago, then
yeah.
is it any wonder that there isn't a lot of confidence around making investment decisions? So women, how do you start making those changes in mindset then?
Yeah, it's look, I think as we've been talking, it bleeds into your personal life, your business life, all of that comes through. And I would say, remember those listening sessions that I was sharing before, when I asked I'm going to break it up into two groups. The over 40 group said to me, if I only knew then what I know now, I would have been more proactive in managing my finances. I just didn't know.
Right.
And I wish I did.
Right.
Then you go to the under 40 group, who then say, I should know better. By now I should know what I'm doing. By now I should feel like I've got a leg up, or at least I've got my goals and my objectives in place. But I always second guess myself. I'm not sure I've got it right. And when I asked, where do you go to get information about, help around your finances, they said they go to two places. They go to their family and they go to Google. Those are two resources. And so,
Well, before you go any further, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because I don't want you. I'm not sure where you're going with it, but I do want to ask that third polling question because I think it might be relevant.
Sure.
So, Chris, can we launch that third polling question?
Absolutely. This is your third polling question. How confident are you making financial decisions? Very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, or prefer not to answer? And this poll will remain up for 60 seconds as you all begin to chime in.
By the way, Maggie, you were saying that, people on this, attending this are CPAs. We have a wide range of attendees. Some of them may be CPAs, people may be bookkeepers, attorneys, CFOs, accountants without the CPA licensure. And as CPAs, they could be in public accounting, business and industry, and government. And so it's interesting because I think, as I think about the diversity of the audience, all of the things we're talking about apply. You're talking about in the context of wealth management, but I invite everyone in the audience to think of it in the context of whatever industry they're in, whatever client base they serve, whether they're selling products or providing services, because the same challenges and considerations and opportunities apply. All right, I got to stop because I see we're at the end of the polling question. I'll wrap up my comment here.
And those are your results.
39% very confident, 54% somewhat confident, 4% not confident, 3% prefer not to answer. And so correlating that back to our gender, we had 64% women, and we are at 54% somewhat confident, 39% confident. There's no matching here because there's no way to know who answered which question which way. But so Maggie, back to what you were saying, I didn't know if you were going to give something away around confidence.
No, I think part of it is the education, the information, the seeking of information, and not feeling that when you ask a question of something that you don't know, that in some way makes you less knowledgeable or that you should know more. Again, it is when I spoke about the two groups, the women who were older who said, "Oh my God, if I knew then what I knew now," and if you ask them what held you back, they said, "I didn't ask. I took a back seat. I let someone else just manage things for me." The younger group feels they need to know more, but don't know how to go about getting it, but know enough to go ask family or look up in Google. Thank God for the internet, right? I mean, it's a resource, and they go to places where they feel credible information is going to be given to them. I think back to regardless, back to the confidence, going and exploring and looking into it will certainly help build that confidence, and that's exactly what we need to do. And that is a way that we could help all segments, whether that's gender or race or orientation, rise up, double click, provide the information, provide the goals, provide the information, the education, and the resources. But once that is given, it's a two-way street. We need to make sure that there's engagement on all parties. Hope that helps.
No, absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, this might be TMI or oversharing, but I'm Black. I'm biracial. I'm half Black, half Filipino. But if you were to ask me, I'd say I identify as Black. And I grew up in a family that was not a family of wealth. And I myself was in the description that you just had. I wasn't comfortable asking about questions about wealth, especially once I passed the CPA exam. I'm a CPA. How dare I ask a question about this? Don't you know it already? And so I even struggled with asking questions. I needed help. I didn't have any guidance from my family about making investment decisions. But I'm in an industry where I don't want to ask a question because I don't want people to think I'm incompetent. And it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
And some
Yeah.
of that was my background. Some of that was my age. Some of that was my gender, because there were all kinds of messages that you get from society and from our broader culture that reinforces these. That's not my place. That's not my role, or I'm not allowed to do that, or I shouldn't. I mean, we have all this language,
That's right.
that's limiting language. Well, we don't have a lot more time. I know we wrap these things up. I think we have to be at least 50 minutes long, but we certainly don't want to run over an hour. I want to ask this last polling question. It's a little early, but that way you can speak to the results. Could we do that last polling question, Chris?
Absolutely. So, what holds you back from making financial decisions? Lack of acknowledgement, fear of commitment, goals not set or unclear, something else, or prefer not to answer?
So
Let's
the
go
first
with one.
answer
Oh, wait,
should
hold
be
on now.
lack of.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away, Maggie. Oh, do you mean the lack of acknowledgement was supposed to be something else?
Lack of knowledge.
Lack of
Yes.
knowledge. Ah, got it. My bad. Except we have people picking it, so there you go. Lack of knowledge. Just a
Have a
few
few
more
more
seconds.
seconds on this one. Okay, I'm going to close and share in 3, 2, and 1. These are your results, Jina.
17% lack of knowledge, 20% fear of commitment, 27% goals not set or unclear, and 29% something else. So
Gotcha.
earlier you were talking about what holds you back, Maggie. Do you find this surprising?
No. Look, I think I think it's a combination of those things, right? I mean, that's why we put up the questions, the answers the way we did, because those are the things
Right.
that hold individuals back. It's interesting that it was almost evenly distributed, but not surprising that all of you gravitated towards one of those as being what holds you back. And so, I think it is a back to that piece that we were talking about earlier. The more information, the more knowledge that you have, it will help you to make a more informed decision about where you're going to go next. So
we had
I'll
someone
stop
come in
there.
through the question that said lack of knowledge would have changed my answer. So thank you for that. That was a typo that didn't get caught. So that was my bad, my mistake. I'll own that. So I want to ask you sort of to share your final thoughts. When we were talking about this and this subject, understanding that when it comes to the bank's approach, recognizing that there needed to be an intentional effort to move into more diverse markets, understanding what the barriers to that were, so kudos to you, and looking at diversity not just in terms of the segments that you want to serve, but in terms of the advisors serving those segments. And recognizing that part of the challenge in your specific industry in particular is that when women are the ones that make most of the buying decisions but don't have the confidence to make those decisions for a number of societal and historical reasons, this is a lot more complex and requires a lot of intention on the part of the organization. And so that was sort of my takeaway from all of this. I don't know, Maggie, do you have any closing thoughts or fix some of the things that I might have said a little differently than you wanted?
No, I think you captured exactly what the objective is. Again, I'm 9 months into the role. I'm certainly educating and informing the organization around these priorities and eye-opening, understanding that it is we can be looking at our segmentation strategy very differently. I'm thankful that the organization continues, Citizens that is, continues to support me in that, you know, there are lots of things. In fact, next week I'm kicking off an effort where I'm bringing others from the organization in to help me think this through on a much broader basis, because it's not just about finance and wealth. It is about debt. It is about savings. It is about investing. And there is this whole way that we could be thinking about how we serve our clients in different segments around the whole spectrum. So others are joining me from throughout the organization to talk about this further. And there is engagement in this process. And I say we're making progress. We're not exactly where we need to be yet, but the conversation is taking place and the commitment is there. And I would ask all of you to go back to your own organization and do the same. Open up the dialogue, talk about this a little bit more. Take the time to double click, not necessarily think about the client's assets as just being a singular focus, but broaden the thinking around that. And I'm sure you will personally benefit as well as the client.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so, as most of you may know, this is a bi-weekly webinar, only we're taking a break. There aren't any webinars happening on April 15. So we'll be back on April 29. And I'm doing something a little bit different because there are a lot of questions that have come in over the past, this webinar series launched in February of 2021. And there have been a lot of questions that we've never gotten a chance to answer. So I'm going back through the Q&A and I'm going to be pulling some questions out. I'm also inviting people to submit new questions. So you can scan the QR code you see here on the screen, or when you download the handout, you can click on that link right there. Or the link is also available on the registration page. So if you plan to join us in 4 weeks, I would encourage you to throw some questions in there. I'll try to get to, I'm going to look and see what areas there were the most questions asked so I can speak to those areas. And so with that, I think it brings us to the close. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed today's conversation.
My pleasure, as did I.
All right, Chris, back to you to close us out.
Well, this was a really, really good conversation today. Hope you all enjoyed these for the attendees. CPA Academy will be working on your credits later on today, and you should receive those in your accounts within 24 hours. There will also be a full webinar evaluation in there as well, also in your folders as well as your email accounts. Thank you again to Jina and Maggie for a fabulous presentation as well. And for the rest of you, have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.